When we try to communicate across cultures, we tend to treat language like a simple input-output machine. Put an English word in, get a foreign word out. But this is the result of swapping the vocabulary without updating the underlying mechanics. A word-for-word translation strips away the unwritten, localized variables that give a sentence its intended meaning. Without those variables, the message simply collapses. To map these breakdowns, we can use the failure matrix. It plots intercultural friction along two axes: lexical friction, simple word-level errors, at the bottom, and pragmatic or cultural friction, societal-level misunderstandings, at the top. Using a foreign vocabulary while clinging to a native sociological framework creates a persistent friction that often goes unnoticed until the entire conversation breaks down. We are going to move systematically up this matrix, starting with micro-level vocabulary disasters and scaling up to macro-level international project management chaos. Fluency is a multimodal concept. It requires the adoption of an entirely new behavioral operating system to support the memorized vocabulary. The most immediate layer of intercultural friction occurs at the word level, specifically through false friends. These are words that share a phonetic or structural form across languages, but possess radically divergent semantics. Consider the Spanish word sensible. In Spanish, it means sensitive. In English, it means logical. A Spanish speaker telling an English colleague that they are feeling very sensible triggers an immediate emotional miscalibration. This specific type of lexical divergence is a constant hazard across European borders. The social stakes escalate quickly. A French speaker discussing healthy eating might reject food with preservatives, which means condoms in French, not preservatives. Or a Dutch speaker might announce they have a run in their panty, which translates to tights in the Netherlands, but carries a much more intimate meaning in English. Under the extreme cognitive load of speaking a second language, the human brain defaults to basic phonetic pattern recognition. It seeks efficiency, grabbing the word that sounds the most familiar, even if the meaning is wrong. We can now plot these specific false friends data points into the low-level lexical error quadrant of the matrix. These phonetic mistakes cause immediate semantic collapse, proving that raw vocabulary is a dangerous tool without its accompanying context. Moving up from the word level, we encounter the rigid social codes of sentence structure, particularly visible in the United Kingdom. The British stiff upper lip is actually a rigid pragmatic code. It equates extreme indirectness directly with respect. This diagram shows a direct request: give me the pen. In many cultures, this is highly efficient. In British English, it is abrasive. To remove the obligation from the listener, the speaker employs syntactic bloat. By inserting modal verbs and gerunds like "would you mind," the sentence physically expands, padding the request with social armor. Conversational lubricants like "to be honest" or "just a quick question" function as social mitigators. They are engineered to soften the interaction rather than serve as literal statements of brevity or truth. In high politeness cultures, syntax is an active defense mechanism designed specifically to prevent cultural friction. Spoken language frequently fails when the accompanying environmental or nonverbal context is misaligned. An expatriate operating in China with zero local vocabulary must rely entirely on visual translation apps and physical gestures to navigate survival tasks like ordering food. The gesture mechanics differ significantly. While the Western system uses two hands to count from 1 to 10, the Chinese system uses these specific one-handed gestural codes. Misunderstanding these numerical codes creates a critical navigational hazard. For a traveler with a severe seafood allergy, misreading a vendor's hand gesture can instantly escalate from a minor confusion to a medical emergency. Similarly, Japanese speakers point to their nose when referring to themselves, whereas a Westerner points to their chest. This spatial programming must be learned alongside the spoken vocabulary. Physiological gestures carry as much semantic weight as spoken words. Without them, oral fluency is insufficient for real-world operation. Scaling our analysis from individual interactions to the organizational level, we can map these behaviors using Geert Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Power distance measures a society's acceptance of hierarchy. Norway and the Netherlands exhibit very low power distance, while China and France operate with high power distance. This chart shows the resulting gap in hierarchical expectations. 53% of French workers expect their managers to possess the exact answers to all questions, compared to only 18% of American workers. We see this macro business data reflected at the micro level. A Japanese student who refers to their instructor as teacher person instead of using the pronoun you is expressing that same hierarchical programming through syntax. Corporate paralysis and classroom awkwardness are often identical symptoms of mismatched hierarchical expectations. Uncertainty avoidance describes a culture's tolerance for ambiguity, strict rules, and unstructured situations. This graph shows how cultural logic distorts project timelines. Germany's low tolerance for uncertainty results in a straight line of meticulous planning. The American approach, which tolerates high ambiguity, plots as an erratic, step-by-step line of trial and error. The French project timeline is disrupted by visible, erratic tremors. These represent the corridor politics and internal friction that inevitably alter the trajectory of organized planning. The Dutch model of consensus building takes a recursive shape. The timeline visualizes as a series of expanding loops, mapping how group consensus shifts as new information is gained over time. Time, efficiency, and progress are subjective cultural constructs rather than universal laws of business. This completed failure matrix displays a cohesive ecosystem. Lexical errors at a dinner table, classroom awkwardness, and international project management failures are all predictable symptoms of the same systemic misalignment. Linguistic fluency is a myth if it excludes the local tolerance for hierarchy, ambiguity, and indirectness. Success abroad depends on accurate cultural calibration rather than perfect literal translation. Because these variables are so complex, mistakes are inevitable. The ability to laugh at oneself is a necessary, engineered buffer to survive the friction of intercultural operation. Language functions as a comprehensive operating system. To communicate effectively, we must adopt the behavioral logic as fully as the words themselves.